And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Welcome to Benchley Night. Oh, look, I forgot to get rid of the Reasonably Fine Art Talk little label down there on the lower right-hand side. Let's get rid of that now. There we go. All right, everybody. How is everybody out there? Did everybody have a good Thanksgiving? We had a lovely Thanksgiving. Betty Sue is up from Texas, and we went down to Amherst, Massachusetts, and had Thanksgiving with Chris Smither and Carol Young. Betty Sue just sang on Chris Smither's new record and is going to be doing some touring with him. And of course, Carol and I were business partners during the 90s. So that was great fun. And now, as we pitch headlong into fascism, it's lovely to have everyone with us tonight. Now, the liberal snowplowing beneficiary this week is the Miss Bellows Falls Diner project, and specifically a fundraiser that we're doing to commemorate the railroad workers of Bellows Falls. My idea is that every few months we will commemorate another industry and hopefully raise enough money to endow counter space or a stool or something for each of those industries. And being a railroad fan, I of course start with railroads. And the person we are honoring is a fellow named Sparky Caswell. Sparky greeted the Amtrak trains for 26 years between 1972 and 2000. So I guess between 1972, fall of 72 and probably fall of 98 into 99. He was a character. He was a character. He had certain stuff he had to live with. And he was uninhibited, ladies and gentlemen. He was uninhibited. There was one time, apparently, he was showing the Amtrak district sales agent to his B&B in Bellows Falls, and Sparky felt the need to relieve himself and chose a nearby hedge, which startled the Amtrak salesperson. But then the person whose house it was came out and was like, "Hi, Sparky." So we loved Sparky. He was an interesting guy. And we are honoring him with naming some counter space or possibly a stool after him. If you're able to, please toss $1 or $2 to the Liberal Snowplowing Do-Gooder Fund to honor Sparky. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a few people to thank. We have Tony from Wisconsin. Hi, Martha. And I see there are 9 people out there, so a few of you are just keeping it on the down low, which is fine. We have a few people to thank here, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, first off, the great Martha Rowley, Raphael Rosner, Mr. John T. Wilhelm, Ms. Sharon Kegeris, Mr. Rick Gavotsky, the ever peripatetic Ms. Terry Hudson, Susan Hammond from up there in Lower Bartonsville, Tom Goldschmidt, Catherine Scholl. Oh, and we have to issue a 1 week late plea for a speedy recovery, Ms. Elise. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is Elise, the wife of a certain feller out there in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. a certain feller, and Elise recently had a tumble or something, and is recovering from it. She must have been staring up so high as the clouds obscured his cranium. She was just looking at a trunk, ladies and gentlemen, the trunk of my very, very, very tall cousin, Mr. Nat Hunter, his little dog Ginger, and his wonderful wife and recovering wife, Elise. Thank you all so much. We're going to have two Robert Benchleys tonight. First off, and these are both from Benchley or Else, one of the books that I was gifted this fall. My Face. Merely as an observer of natural phenomena, I am fascinated by my own personal appearance. This does not mean that I am pleased with it, mind you, or that I can even tolerate it. I simply have a morbid interest in it. Each day I look like someone or something different. I never know what it's going to be until I steal a look in the glass. Oh, I don't suppose you could really call it stealing. It does belong to me after all. One day I look like Wimpy, the hamburger fancier of the Popeye the Sailor saga. Another day it may be Wallace Beery. And a third day, if I've let my mustache get out of hand, it is Bairnsfeather's old Bill. And not until I peek do I know what the show is going to be. Some mornings, if I look in the mirror soon enough after getting out of bed, there is no resemblance to any character at all, either in or out of fiction. And I turn quickly to look behind me, convinced that a stranger has spent the night with me and is peering over my shoulder in a sinister fashion, merely to frighten me. On such occasions, the shock of finding that I am actually possessor of the face in the mirror is sufficient to send me scurrying back to bed, completely unnerved. All of this is, of course, very depressing. I often give off a low moan at the sight of the new day's metamorphosis, but I can't seem to resist the temptation to learn the worst. I even go out of my way to look at myself in store window mirrors just to see how long it will take me to recognize myself. If I happen to have on a new hat or I'm walking with a limp, I sometimes pass right by my reflection without even nodding. Then I begin to think, you must have given off some visual impression into that mirror. You're not a disembodied spirit yet, I hope. And I go back and I look again, and sure enough, the strange-looking man I thought was walking just ahead of me in the reflection turns out to have been my own image the whole time. It makes a fella stop and think, I can tell you that. This almost masochistic craving to offend my own aesthetics. This almost masochistic craving to offend my own aesthetic sense by looking at myself and wincing also comes out when snapshots or class photographs are being passed around. The minute someone brings the envelope containing the week's grist of vacation prints from the drugstore developing plant, I can hardly wait to get my hands on them. I try to dissemble my eagerness to examine those in which I myself figure, but there is a greedy look in my eye which must give me away. The snapshots in which I do not appear are so much dross in my eyes, but I pretend that I am equally interested in them all. Oh, this is very good of Joe, I say, with a hollow ring in my voice, sneaking a look at the next print to see if I am in it. Ah, here at last is one in which I show up nicely. By nicely, I mean clearly. Try as I will to pass it by casually, my eyes rivet themselves on that corner of the group in which I am standing. And then, when the others have left the room, I surreptitiously go through the envelope again, just to gaze my fill on the slightly macabre sight of myself as others see me. In some pictures, I look even worse than I had imagined. On what I call my good days, I string along pretty close to form. But day in and day out, in mirror or in photograph, there's always that slight shock of surprise, which, although unpleasant, lends a tang to the adventure of peeking. I never can quite make it seem possible that it is really poor little me, the little me I know so well, and yet who frightens me. So when face to face. My only hope is that in this constant metamorphosis, which seems to be going on, a winning number may come up sometime, if only for a day. Just what the final outcome will be is hard to predict. I may settle down to a constant, plodding replica of Man Mountain Dean in my old age, or change my style completely and end up as a series of Bulgarian peasant types. I may just grow old along with Wimpy. But whatever is in store for me, I shall watch the daily modulations with an impersonal fascination, not unmixed with awe, at Mother Nature's gift for caricature, and will take the bitter with the sweet, and I shall keep a stiff upper lip. As a matter of fact, my upper lip is pretty fascinating by itself, in a bizarre sort of way. All right, that's the first one, ladies and gentlemen. And then just a very brief one, a very brief little one. Truffle poisoning. One of the easiest forms of pretense to break down is the pretense of enthusiasm for exotic foods. Just bring on the exotic foods. When a man opens his eyes very wide and says, "Boy, what I couldn't do to a rasher of Japanese roll mops right now," go get him a rasher of Japanese roll mops and see what he does to them. The chances are he can't gag down more than 3 mouthfuls. Almost everyone has some little dish that he talks a lot about liking, because it is either hard to get or hard to swallow. But when they're confronted with their dream dish, it very often turns out that nausea flies in the window. I, for one, used to rave a lot about truffles. Incidentally, while raving, I was apparently mispronouncing the word. Now, all that I actually knew about truffles was that they came as a fixing to several very tasty dishes. I'd never really tasted a truffle on the hoof, but I'd read about them, and I'd talked as if all of Paris knew my craving for them. Then, one night I had my bluff called. A friend with whom I was dining said, "Hey, Bob, you ought to be very happy tonight. I see that they have truffles au nature on the menu." I said, "Oh boy." There being very few things that I cannot eat with relish, I had every reason to believe that I could carry on with a truffle, even though I had never tasted one. And I probably could have made a go of it if I'd been in top form that night, but I was more in the mood to be pampered. And a plain truffle, although considered a delicacy, is not exactly succulent. It turned out It turned out to be something on the order of edible pumice, or a small, hard, black sponge. It had no sauce. It was just pumice. But I had to dig in and look as much like an ecstatic epicure as I could, smacking my lips and making French gestures with my free hand, while my companion watched with what I thought I detected to be high glee. I was cured of my truffle talk, but I still have several dishes that I pretend to crave and which I hope I never have to eat under close scrutiny. One of them is tête de veau, or the head of a calf served with the brains, ears, and eyes. If you ever hear me raving about tête de veau, it will pay you to order me one and then watch. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that does it for Benchley Night tonight. That does it for Benchley Night tonight. We'll be back next week. With another episode of Classic Robert Benchley. You take good care, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.